Welcome to our presentation series designed to help businesses making small amounts of hazardous waste comply with New Hampshire's rules. In this presentation, we're going to figure out what size category of hazardous waste business you are, which will tell you which regulations you need to follow. A business that makes hazardous waste is called a generator of hazardous waste, and the more waste the generator makes, the more regulations they'll have to follow. The state of New Hampshire divides generators into two sizes, and the business needs to figure out which of them they fall into. To do this, they'll need to track two things from month to month: how much waste they have on site and how much they make each month. Eventually, the business will have a good understanding of their generator size and will usually know what category they fall into without having to keep track of these amounts so closely. These categories or sizes are small quantity generators, or SQGs, and full quantity generators, or FQGs. As you might guess, small generators make the least amount of hazardous waste, and full quantity generators make the most hazardous waste. It also makes sense that small generators would have less regulations to follow and full generators would have more. In general terms, a business needs to identify all the wastes that they make and then figure out which of those are regulated as hazardous wastes. If you need help with that, feel free to review our video titled Waste Determinations for SQGs, or our more involved 10-part hazardous waste determination video series on our YouTube channel. Once you know what hazardous wastes you have, you can measure them to see what size generator you are. We'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Then finally, once you know what size you are, there's a requirement to tell DES which category you fall into. There's an official form called the RCRA-C Site Identification Form, also known as the notification form, that you would use to tell us. While we certainly care about all hazardous wastes that you make, there are some that we feel we don't need to track as closely. These are used oil being recycled, lead-acid batteries being recycled, and something called universal wastes that, again, are being recycled. Universal wastes include common items such as fluorescent lamps, old TV and computer monitors, and recycled batteries. Again, they're hazardous, but when they're being recycled, we're a little less concerned about keeping track of how much you have. Earlier, I said that you will measure the hazardous wastes that you have to figure out your generator size. More specifically, you'll need to know how much, if any, acutely hazardous wastes you have, and how much non-acute hazardous waste you have, and how much non-acute hazardous waste you make in each individual calendar month. What do I mean when I talk about acute and non-acute wastes? It might be that this is the first time you've heard of acutely hazardous waste. Think of these as the most dangerous hazardous wastes out there. They can cause a lot of damage in even small amounts, so they're given extra special attention. Because we worry so much about them, having just a little of this type of waste can put you in the largest generator size category with the most regulations. The good news is, by far, most businesses don't have any of these wastes. Again, if you'd like a little more information about acute and non-acute hazardous waste, see our other hazardous waste determination videos on YouTube. Some of these acute wastes are medicines, so businesses in the healthcare industry tend to have them. Another place where these might turn up are in chemical laboratories and storage rooms, where uncommon chemicals may be used and stored. Other sources include pesticides that are less commonly used these days, and even nicotine, as we know, a common ingredient in the vaping industry. With that background, let's move forward to go through the actual steps to get our generator size. Let's start with those acute hazardous wastes. Of the few acute wastes that are out there, the most common are found on the hazardous waste P list. You'll remember from other videos that these are specific chemicals that are on a special list in our rules. Others that are rare or even unseen in New Hampshire include a few wastes from the F list. If you do find out that you have acute hazardous wastes, add up all of what you have at your business. Remember, we're only looking at wastes here. If you have products that are chemicals on the P list, they aren't regulated under our rules. Also, be careful not to add in the weight of any packaging. If you have 1 ounce of acute waste stored in a 3-pound bottle, we only care about the waste, and you only have 1 ounce of waste as far as we're concerned. Once you know how much acute waste you have, add up the total amount. If it comes to 2.2 pounds or more on site, you are a full quantity generator. For safety reasons, you'll have to follow the most regulations. Let's take a quiz. Julie has 17 pounds of P-listed nicotine waste at her business. Do we know what size generator Julie's business is? What do you think? Julie's business is clearly a full quantity generator because she has 2.2 pounds or more of acute hazardous waste stored at her business. Let's move on to our next step, which is the one that will be most important for all generators. That doesn't mean you can ignore the other steps, but this one describes what most of us deal with. We already figured out if we had acute waste. Now let's identify all the other hazardous wastes we make that are not acute. Notice I said make because this time we aren't measuring the total amount we have stored at our business. We're instead measuring the amount we make in each separate calendar month. Each and every month? Forever? Well, technically, yes, but most businesses will find that they stay in one size category right along. You have to measure it every month for a while, though, to see if that's true for your site. So watch closely for how much non-acute hazardous waste you make and add it up at the end of each calendar month. Then go to step 4 to find out what size your business is. If your business makes less than 220 pounds in a calendar month, then it is a small quantity generator. If your business makes 220 pounds or more in a calendar month, then it is a full quantity generator. Recognize that it's not uncommon for a business to make different amounts of non-acute hazardous waste from month to month, and therefore their generator size can change from month to month too. Here's our next quiz. Tim makes 127 pounds of non-acute hazardous waste in May, 240 in June, and 170 in July. He doesn't have any acute hazardous waste, so we don't have to worry about that. Do we know what Tim's generator size will be for each of those months? Sure we do. In May, Tim's business made 127 pounds, which is way less than 220. His business is a small quantity generator for that month. In June, his business made 240 pounds of non-acute waste, which is more than the 220-pound limit. For June, his business is a full quantity generator. And finally, in July, His business made 170 pounds, which is once again below the 220, and he goes back to a small quantity generator. Sometimes Tim's facility is a full quantity generator, and other times it's a small generator. That means that one month they'd only have to follow easier rules to be compliant, and the next month tough rules, then back to easier rules, and so on. Honestly, they'll never be able to keep it straight and will almost certainly run into trouble staying in compliance. We call businesses whose generator size keeps changing yo-yos. It's not an insult, it just describes how the rate that they make hazardous waste keeps going up and down. For a business like this, the smart move is to just declare that they're a full generator and stick with the more difficult rules. It might be overkill in months when they only make a little waste, but it will simplify their life and help to keep them out of trouble for those months when they might otherwise forget to follow the more intense rules. I guess that would be step 5. Don't be a yo-yo. If your generator size is going to change more than, say, once a year, you should just stay at the higher level. And remember that you can't average how much waste you make over the months. Each calendar month is a separate snapshot of your hazardous waste activity and your generator size. This table summarizes everything I've talked about so far. Your business will fall into one of two categories, either a small generator or a full generator. We consider the total amount of acutely hazardous waste you have stored on site, and we consider how much non-acute hazardous waste you make in each calendar month. If your business has less than 2.2 pounds of acutely hazardous waste and you make less than 220 pounds of non-acute waste in every calendar month, you are a small generator. On the other hand, if you ever have 2.2 pounds or more of acute waste on site, or you make 220 pounds or more of non-acute waste in a calendar month, you are a full generator. We've gone over how to figure out your generator's classification. If you found out that you're a full quantity generator, you can stop right here. But if your business is a small generator, there are still a couple other things that you need to be aware of that could affect how you're regulated. Small generators make very little waste each month and have very few regulations because there is little risk from a site that only has a little hazardous waste. But what happens after many months or even years? Eventually, that business making a little hazardous waste could end up with a fair amount of it stored on site. This is actually a pretty common thing. It costs money to ship hazardous waste, and you pay extra for each time a transporter shows up. So it makes sense that a business would try not to ship their waste too often. We have to recognize that businesses that go this route can pose a little more risk, though, so there are a few more rules that they have to follow. These extra rules are called the extended storage provisions, and we'll cover them in another video. These businesses are still small generators, but they have a little more to comply with than other SQGs. Some businesses feel that following the extra rules is kind of a pain and that life would just be simpler if they deal with as few rules as possible. If that's the case, they can ship their waste every time they get close to 220 pounds and avoid the extended storage rules. If a business only makes a very little waste at a time, so their shipments don't happen too often, this option makes perfect sense. While pretty uncommon, a small generator could theoretically save up so much waste over time that they reach another limit. If a small generator gets 2,200 pounds of non-acute waste on site, we say, you know, we can see that you only make a little every month, but there's so much at your business that we just can't let you follow the easier rules for small generators. Instead, you're going to have to become a full quantity generator and follow the higher level of regulation. As I say, this is a very unusual situation. If we know that a small generator is getting close to that 2,200 pound limit, we'll always advise them to ship it off site and avoid making them become a full quantity generator. We can't watch every business, so it's really important for them to know for themselves how much they have on site. Let's look at this table to see these two extra steps that are applicable for just small generators. I've highlighted them with the yellow box. Remember that if you have less than 2.2 pounds of acute hazardous waste on site, and you always make less than 220 pounds of non-acute waste in a month, you are a SQG. But if you start to accumulate that non-acute waste, you start to trigger additional requirements. If you have 220 pounds or more on site, you need to follow the extended storage requirements. And if you collect 2,200 pounds or more at one time, you become a full quantity generator. And nobody wants that. Let's look at these examples. Tim added up all the non-acute hazardous waste at his small generator business and found out that he had 2,627 pounds in storage. What generator size should we give Tim's business? Well, since the business has 2,200 pounds or more of non-acute hazardous waste on site, they are unfortunately a full generator. Hopefully, Tim will get that waste shipped off site as soon as possible and they can go back to being a small quantity generator. And hopefully, he'll be a little better at tracking his waste amount in the future so he doesn't have to deal with it again. It looks like Tim's struggling with this a little bit, and later he realized that he added wrong. He actually only had 1,627 pounds of waste. So what's his generator size really? The good news is that Tim's business is still a small generator because he has less than 2,200 pounds of non-acute waste. Tim needs to remember, though, that because he has more than 220 pounds stored at his site, he still needs to follow the extended storage provisions. It's easy to look at your shipping papers and think of it as a nice, tidy summary of how much waste you make. But this can be a trap. You seldom can look at how much waste you might ship off once every several months or even years and use that to guarantee how much you made in each separate calendar month. While it can be used to get an estimate, the generator really has to measure what they're making each month to know what their generator size is. There are a couple of exceptions. If a hazardous waste shipping paper shows that 2.2 pounds of an acute waste was shipped, then that amount must have been stored on site at one time, and the facility certainly was a full generator. Likewise, a company that ships large amounts of hazardous waste over and over are pretty likely full quantity generators. But again, in most cases, shipping documents are not what you want to use to figure out what size generator your business is. How about this question? Julie shipped 1,800 pounds of non-acute waste in July. Can she tell what her generator size was for each month since the last time she shipped in September? Heck no. Unless she's tracking the amount her business makes month to month, She doesn't know how much of that 1,800 pounds she made in October, how much was made in November or December, and so on. And remember, you can't average. You look at each calendar month separately. After figuring out which wastes you make that are regulated as hazardous waste, figuring out your generator size is probably the next most important thing to do to be in compliance. Knowing what level of regulation you're at tells you which rules you're going to be required to follow. So, to emphasize a few points in this presentation, let's do one last quiz. Our first question is, having or storing greater than or equal to how many pounds of acute hazardous waste will make your business a full generator? The answer is having or storing greater than or equal to 2.2 pounds of acutely hazardous waste will make your business a full generator. Second question. Can you average the amount of non-acute waste you generate over several months? The answer is no. Third question. Is used oil for recycle counted toward your generator status? Once again, the correct answer is no. To summarize this whole presentation, New Hampshire has two size categories for businesses that make or generate hazardous waste. Businesses that make small amounts of hazardous waste and have small amounts stored on site are called small quantity generators. Businesses that make larger quantities of hazardous waste or have larger amounts stored on site are called full quantity generators, or FQGs, and have more rules that they have to comply with. There are some hazardous wastes that are considered to be acutely hazardous because they're so dangerous even in small amounts. Having just a little acute hazardous waste can make a business very highly regulated. Just 2.2 pounds of this stuff will put you into the highest regulated full generator category. Fortunately, most businesses don't have these, but they are pretty common in the healthcare industry. Your business can become a full quantity generator in three ways. One is if your business has that 2.2 pounds or more of acute waste stored on site. Second is if you have 2,200 pounds or more of non-acute waste stored on site. And lastly, any business that makes 220 pounds of non-acute hazardous waste in a calendar month is a full quantity generator for that month. The last point I'd like to highlight is that a business can be a small generator, making small amounts each month, but if they store 220 pounds or more of their waste, they need to follow a few additional requirements in the extended storage requirements. These are nowhere near as intense as the full quantity generator requirements, but do add a little extra control because of the moderate amount of waste stored at the business. That does it for this presentation. If you still have questions and watching the video again isn't helpful, feel free to give us a call. Our goal is always to help you comply with the New Hampshire hazardous waste rules by providing as much guidance as possible. And sometimes you just need to talk to a real person. Our staff can be reached toll-free during normal work hours at 1-866-429-9278. If your preference is email, drop us a line at our hazardous waste compliance address, hwcomp@des.nh.gov.